Hi there, I'm Pips Pettit from Sylva's Animation Factory. If you've built anything in Second Life that you've wanted to sell, or even just to pass on to friends and family, you really need to know how to set permissions. This protects your work, and if you've bought scripts or animations, it also protects your investment. Failing to set permissions allows anyone to copy your build, or anything it contains, and give it away or resell it without your permission. Also, if you've purchased pieces for your build, whether they're prefab meshes, scripts, animations, or any other builder tool sold full permissions, you likely agreed to a license that requires you to set the permissions to either no copy or no transfer. Not doing this can get you in deep trouble and can result in major consequences. You don't want that, trust me. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, there are three main steps to setting permissions: setting object permissions, setting content permissions, and checking the permissions. I highly recommend that you have an alt or a trusted friend who can check the permissions for you, but I'll go over a few different ways to check them even if you don't. We're going to start with setting your object permissions. This is the easiest bit and can be done in two different places, either resed in world or in your inventory. To set object permissions while your item is resed in world, open up your edit window. And if it's not already expanded, click the button to expand the object properties. If you look at the General tab, you'll see a section down at the bottom that has checkboxes with a header Next Owner. These are the object permission settings, and the permissions that the next owner will see when they receive your object. The Modify checkbox means that the next owner is allowed to modify the object. They can change the size, name, texture, color, link set, and contents. For the purpose of this video, we're not really going to worry about the Modify box. The Copy and Transfer checkboxes are the main thing we're going to focus on. These boxes are what really protect your work. They're how the server decides whether the next owner can give your item away or copy it. If you leave both of these checked, the next owner can make as many copies as they want and they can give them away. In some cases, that's not a bad thing, but usually you don't really want that. You can uncheck either the copy or the transfer checkbox, but not both. This means you have to choose between allowing the next owner to have one copy that they can give away, or to make as many copies as they want or need, but not be able to transfer them. All you have to do is choose which permissions you want to disable and uncheck those boxes. I like to leave my builds with copy and modify permissions, so I'm going to uncheck the transfer box. It's that simple. Now, if you already have the item in your inventory, it's a little more complicated. First, you need to find the object in your inventory. If you're like me, you have to hunt for it. But I was smart, and I isolated it for this video. Once you find it, right-click on it and click on Properties in the pop-up menu. This gives you the Inventory Item Properties window. A little above the bottom is the same set of checkboxes that you get when you res your item. If you look, one of my checkboxes is grayed out. This can be a problem if you have contents that you didn't create, especially scripts. I couldn't set this item as no modify if I wanted to, because there's a script inside that I don't have modify permissions on. The only way for me to fix this would be to res the item and set the permissions there. I can still set it to no transfer though. I just can't set the modify permissions. Another reason why I like to set the permissions while an item is resed is that I can set permissions, descriptions, and even names of multiple items at the same time. This can cut down on the time it takes to do sometimes tedious process. Also, if you set the permissions on one item and copy it over, the permissions that you set will remain on the copied item as well as the original. Okay, now that we have object permissions set, we're going to talk about content permissions. The biggest misconception about permissions in Second Life is that setting the permissions on the object will set the permissions of everything in its contents. It won't. You have to set the content permissions separately. This can be a good thing because it lets you have different permissions for the object itself and its contents. It used to be that this was a long process that involved pulling up the properties of every item in the object contents and setting permissions manually. You can still do this if you want, of course. If you want to go this route, I found the quickest way is to open up the Content tab on the Edit window, select all the items in the object, right-click, and open the Properties window. Then you can uncheck whatever boxes you want to uncheck, and hit Ctrl-W to close that tab of the Properties window, leaving you with the next item. However, when you have hundreds of animations or multiple items with child prims with the contents, this can take forever. Thankfully, years ago, we got a great little permissions button on the Content tab. Click this and you get the Adjust Content Permissions window. You can choose which type of inventory you want to apply permissions to. In this case, I want all of my animations and scripts set to no mod, no transfer. But I want users to be able to change the note cards if they want. So I'm going to leave those full permissions. So I'm going to hit the Clear button to uncheck everything, and then select only the animation and script checkboxes. If you're unsure what each icon here refers to, you can hover your mouse pointer over the picture, and it will tell you what it's for. The running man, for example, is for animations, and the eyeballs are for body parts. Next, you want to choose what you want the next owner to be able to do. I don't want them to be able to modify or transfer the scripts and animations, so I'm going to uncheck those and leave only the copy box selected. Once everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Apply button. Make sure you do this before you close this window or your permissions will not be set. Now, the handy bit about this is just like setting the object permissions, you can do this with multiple items selected, and it will apply the changes to all of the items, as well as any child prims that might have contents. So if you have, say, a sofa with multiple scripted cushions, you don't have to go in and set the permissions on every cushion. Nice, huh? You can also run the permission setting tool multiple times for different types of items. If I wanted my animations to be modifiable as well as copyable, I could go back and select only the animations box, and then check Modify and Copy, and hit Apply again. Script permissions will stay no mod, while the animations are now going to be modifiable. So, now we have our object and contents permissions set. We're done, right? Not so fast. The last step is to check your permissions. You could skip this step, but we all know how reliable Second Life is. There have been times where I've set permissions only to have it not show up for the next user, no matter what method I use to change them. And we really don't want to do all this work only to have a server hiccup screw it up. There are a couple of ways to do this. The most tedious is, like the old way of setting permissions, opening all the contents of your item and going through each window to check what the next owner permissions are set to. Control W is your friend here. Another quicker way is to have a script. This particular script that I'm using is available free of charge at Sylva's Animation Factory, which I'll link to in the description of this video. All you have to do is drag the script from your inventory to the Contents tab of the item, and it will run through the list and let you know if anything is set to both copy and transfer. As you can see, I have one item with both copy and transfer permissions, the note card that I intentionally left full permissions. This is what I expected to see, so I'm good. Now, you have to run this on every prim that has something in its contents, so double check to make sure you've checked everything. Yep, we're good. Now, the method I prefer involves having a second avatar or a trusted friend, and is rather simple. I take the item or items that I need checked and drop them on the other avatar. Then all they have to do is res out the item and open up the Contents tab. You can tell at a glance that everything is set correctly, and I can use the Edit Linked option to check for any child prim contents that may be there. In this case, everything looks good. Now, at this point, you're officially done setting and checking your permissions, and can go on to the fun part, sharing your build, maybe even making a little money off of it. Have fun building, and if you have any questions about permissions, feel free to ask in the comments. Thanks for watching.